Greetings, I, the Warowl, greets you. This time we're going to be briefly covering player roles. You can think of a player role like a position in a conventional sport, where certain strengths and weaknesses of individual players and playstyles benefit the different jobs they could fill, each making an important part of the whole team. There are no set roles in Counter-Strike, as it is a fairly dynamic game, but there are general principles that have developed over time, as players have figured out the best way to function as a cohesive unit. The first we'll talk about is the entry, commonly called the entry fragger. The entry is quite simply the first player to engage the enemy on the offense. They are the ones who will push forward to take a position. The skills that mark a great entry fragger is the one who has quick, accurate aim, which goes hand in hand with the ability to clear common CT positions. For example, when clearing short A on Dust 2, a good entry fragger knows where to look, where his enemies have been in previous rounds, the different common spots. He knows how to shoot people when being the offensive player and being put at a disadvantage. And because you're the first guy charging in, the entry fragger needs to have balls of steel. You're the guy who's charging in amongst bullets, flashbangs, nades, smokes, Molotov cocktails, and death. In fact, an entry fragger is the position most prone to death, which is often why entry fraggers are underrated in the statistics. If an entry fragger gets a pick, they've done their job and then some. If the entry fragger dies but trades his death to allow a teammate to get a pick or take position, he's still done his job and benefited the team. The entry fragger's job is to die. While tongue-in-cheek and somewhat inaccurate that statement might be, it does have a point. The next role we'll talk about is the support role, since it goes hand in hand with the entry. This is the player who supports the entry fragger. They have two main goals: to push with the entry fragger in order to trade if the entry fragger goes down, while holding an alternate angle, and to throw grenades. While it is possible for the entry fragger to flash himself out or throw a smoke before engaging, it makes more sense for the support player to coordinate with them, throwing the flash for them when they call it, while the entry fragger pushes out and uses it to take a position. The traits of a great support player are a good understanding of the different nades and flashes and the different trajectories that they can take, as well as teamwork and coordination. They need to be watching their teammates back. Nothing is more frustrating in Counter-Strike than getting picked and a support player not taking the easy trade that the entry fragger worked for. We then move on to the lurk. As the name suggests, this is the player who's going in sneaky-beaky-like, the player trying to flank their opponents to get an advantageous position and pick unsuspecting players, the backstabber. Generally, when taking a bomb site, the lurk will play an alternate position and attempt to kill the players rotating to retake the bomb sites. Using our Dust 2 example, lurk players on the T side will sometimes sit around middle or lower B tunnels or even up on short A and wait for CTs to rotate so they can grab a pick. The traits of a great lurker are positioning and knowing when to engage. Sometimes it makes sense to let a player walk by so you can set up to kill multiple players and give information to your teammates. The next role is the IGL, or in-game leader. This is the brains of the organization, the strat caller. While the IGL can take up the role of a support player, a lurk player, an opper, or really anything, it is a role in and of itself. Anyone who has ever worked with a team in any respect knows you need to have a leader, one clear voice that is calling the shots. While communication and calling is important for all players to participate in, coming up with the strategy and tactics is the job of the IGL. They call when to buy weapons, how to set up, when to rotate, which predetermined strategy or setup will be executed. They call out when to breach a bomb site. The traits of a great IGL are leadership, as well as the ability to think on your feet. The best leaders in Counter-Strike are not the ones who simply use predefined strategies. They're the ones who can call dynamically and change positioning and timing based on what the enemy team is doing. The in-game leader isn't a coach. They're in the game. They have a responsibility to perform well while also constantly thinking about the next play. They gotta be good multitaskers. So that's player roles, but when we talk about weapon roles, we fall into two different categories: riflers and oppers. This one is pretty self-explanatory. Many teams will play with a designated op player, while the rest will take on rifler roles. They will base the team's economy around getting an op for that player on certain rounds, who can use it to hold specific long-range positions. Even though the player specializes in opping, it's important that they can use rifles as well, since many rounds the team won't be able to afford an op. There are also secondary oppers who can op as well, but at the same time focus on rifling, and op when doing a double op setup, which is common CT side Dust 2. Now it's time for me to throw a curveball at this tutorial. Everything I just told you is useless. There's no roles in Counter-Strike. The game is more fluid than that. We just use these terms to refer to what a player is doing at a specific point in time. Some players tend to do these things better than others, so the IGL will put them in that situation, and naturally, they tend to find their way into that situation more often than not. It's not like you have to select entry fragger or support player from a list at the start of the game. You could argue that there is no support player. Anyone can be any one of these roles at any time. It just depends on the situation and what makes the most sense. And that's one of the things that makes Counter-Strike so great. I made a whole tutorial just to say the tutorial was worthless? I'm sorry.